What up, Simps? Welcome back to the Only Lands channel. I have another spicy brew to share with you all today. Gev's Scaled Scorch is just a freaky little lizard dude, and I'm here for it. Now, I know he easily combos with any persist creature and a sack outlet, but I've been playing Magic for a long time, and I have done the whole persist combo thing plenty of times before, so it doesn't really interest me anymore. So I'm not including any persist creatures, but if that rocks your boat, this deck still has a few sack outlets, so you could definitely slot those combo lines in if you wanted to power up the deck a little and really enjoy combos. I, personally though, am more interested in just using Gev as a 2-mana triple anthem for all of our creatures. If you can consistently deal 1 damage to each opponent before casting your creatures, they will all enter with 3 +1/+1 counters, which is an insane buff, and can be quite abusable on the right creatures. If you guys watched the recent Game Nights episode featuring Dr. Lupo, he was playing a really cool Wild Seer deck, and he had this moment where he almost won the game with Communal Brewing combined with Ojer Axonil, making Ojer enter with 8 power. Then, with Pyrohemia, this made it so that each activation of Pyrohemia would deal 8 damage to each of his opponents and opponents' creatures while only dealing 1 to himself and his own creatures. I thought that was awesome, and I realized Gev could be a easy replacement for the Communal Brewing, but in our command zone. So I took some inspiration from Dr. Lupo and decided to brew Gev as a burn deck that aims to go over the top of our opponents with Ojer as a huge damage multiplier. Now, Ojer is the most powerful card in the list, being a 7 times damage multiplier, but he is not necessary for the deck to function, just turns the thing up to 11. So I wouldn't call him a secret commander, but I did build around him, including a tutor that I normally would stay away from, and some reanimation and protection for him. Let's dive into the burn that we run, and these burn cards serve double duty in this list. They are important because they turn our Gev ability on early, and they double as our win con once we find Ojer in the late game. Our 1-drops are key, as they allow us to curve out nicely with Gev on turn 2, and then immediately start dropping giant creatures on turn 3. Creeping Bloodsucker, Stormfist Crusader, and Descent into Avernus are amazing enablers for Gev, guaranteeing we turn his ability on to the maximum at the beginning of our turn, allowing us to be a bit more flexible with when we want to play our creatures, and are just more consistent than our creatures that have to attack. Impact Tremors, Agate Instigator, and Molten Gatekeeper serve as good Gev enablers, but are mostly win cons, when combined with one of our mass token makers. The token makers are also just super powerful on their own when they're spitting out 4/4s. Krenko is especially synergistic, getting a really nice head start on his growth from Gev and then spitting out more and more 4/4s every turn. Hangerback Walker is similar, getting a nice head start, but needs a sack outlet to create the tokens, or just is good board wipe insurance. Goblin Bombardment is a great way to push through additional damage using these excess tokens in the late game, and with Ojer can be dealing upwards of 7 damage per activation, which is just ridiculous. One of the most consistent ways I've found to win the game in this deck is get 1 or 2 of our deal damage when creature enters cards, and then drop Ojer into a token maker on the same turn. This just absolutely shreds our opponent's life totals, which will almost certainly not be at full due to the rest of our burn in the list and all our creatures being giant. There is of course Pyrohemia, which again is a great Gev enabler and win con. Defiler of Instinct is both ramp as well as being burn damage that can pick off small creatures or deal damage for Gev, or just be huge chunks of damage with Ojer. Walking Ballista can be played with 3 counters for 0 mana and just goes nuts with Ojer, or we can load it up with counters from our tokens dying with the Ozolith, or turn all of our creatures into Walking Ballistas with Agath's Soul Cauldron. Terror of the Peaks acts as our backup Ojer when our token makers are making 4/4s. Terror destroys people very quickly. These burn enablers and token makers make up the core of our game plan. The rest of the deck is full of vegetables to keep the gas flowing and make sure we can deploy our game plan effectively. And liking and subscribing is the best way to keep the gas flowing for me and this channel. Thanks to you all, we just hit 1,000 subscribers, so I will be doing a deck tech on my signature deck for next week's video. This Gev list is very low to the ground and aggressive, so we need a lot of card advantage to make sure we can keep up the pressure and survive through any interaction that gets thrown our way. We have a good mix of one-off card advantage like Jessica's Will and Glimpse the Impossible, and sustained advantage that will generate us a lot of value throughout the game. Fireglass Mentor is a really underrated little 2-drop that also happens to be a lizard and will draw us the best of our 2 top cards each turn. Lelia and Inti help our +1/+1 counter plan while giving us some nice impulse draw. Nikara and Blood Tracker are awesome board wipe protection, which will draw us a ton of cards, and we can trigger them ourselves with our sack outlets. Obnixilis, Dragonhawk, Commune Celebration, and Rakdos are all capable of drawing us like 6+ cards a turn cycle. These all generate so much gas to make sure we can keep the pressure on. Dragonhawk may seem weird at an initial glance, since most of our creatures are very small, but 4 power is actually the perfect number when Gev is putting 3 +1/+1 counters on all of our creatures. After a token maker comes down, Dragonhawk can easily be impulse drawing us like 10 cards a turn, and if we can't use all those cards, it's just going to dish out tons of burn damage. I think Dragonhawk is just a really underrated value engine in general, and with the 7 power Ojer in play, it can just murder people. For ramp, again, I prioritized 1 mana ramp and creatures that can attack and benefit from our Gev Anthem. Our deck is also pretty heavily red, and we really want to be able to cast multiple red spells in one turn in order to win the game, so I also included Ruby Medallion. Crystalline Crawler and Ruthless Technomancer can also just give us big bursts of mana that we can save for the big turn that we're going to use to close out the game. Crawler is also amazing to put under an Agatha's Soul Cauldron, allowing us to use all of our +1/+1 counters as mana, and consistently grow our creatures by just tapping them each turn. This is also kind of a group slug deck, so we are going to be dealing ourselves a lot of damage as we burn the table, so I included a few lifelink enablers to make sure we can keep our life total healthy. I have already covered a lot of interaction, but to round it out, we have a Rakdos Charm, Feed the Swarm, I hate this card, but Rakdos will take the enchantment removal it can get, and Chaos Warp, Fell the Profane, Blasphemous Act, and a pet card of mine, Auntie Blight. Auntie Blight is awesome, being able to chuck her counters for direct damage, and is another Walking Ballista-esque creature to throw under Agatha's Soul Cauldron to turn all of our creatures into machine guns.
Gra, gra, gra. Pop a cap in your opponent's ass if you want.
And that's going to wrap it up for this deck tech. Leave a comment down below if you enjoyed this take on Gev, and remember to like and subscribe to my Only Lands for the spiciest deck content on the internet. Thank you guys again, and I'll see you next time for my signature deck tech. Peace!